Often in actual games, you have various options with which move you could start a ko. What should you take into account while making a choice? Different ways of starting a ko might lead to different results when the ko is finished. Try to imagine what will be the final shape in case you win the ko and the final shape in case you lose it. Try to put your stone in a place that you will not be ashamed of once the ko is over. And it's even better if, after finishing the ko, your opponent's shape will look stupid. Let's look at this black group in the corner. White can kill it in ko, and white has two possibilities. Either white could attach or play the knight's move. Both moves would lead to the ko, so which one would you choose? If white starts with an attachment, black goes through, plays a throw-in, and another throw-in. Then, if white manages to win the ko, white will capture 4 black stones. Black stones got taken off of the board. That's super clean. And how about the other variation? If white starts with the knight's move, black would bump, white tries to take away black's eye. And now, if white manages to win the ko, white doesn't capture black stones yet. And you might think, how does it matter? Anyway, black's group is dead. But imagine what happens if black plays this move. Should white answer or not? It's quite annoying. If we don't answer, then black can connect their group in ko. But do we want to add one more stone to this position? Look that in the other variation, white wouldn't have any problems. White can just play elsewhere or even attack this stone. If that example wasn't too obvious, then let me show this life and death problem. Black can kill white's group in ko. And what is the correct first move? Yeah, there are 2 moves which will finish in a ko. But after one of them, white plays the throw-in, the ko starts, and then, if black manages to win the ko, white's group still stays on the board, and moreover, white has a very big eye, so white can later take black stones, black will need to add a move, and yeah, white has again a lot of center moves from the outside. Maybe even this peep will be very dangerous for black. On the other hand, if black starts with this move and white plays the throw-in, black takes, let's say white plays a ko threat and black captures, then white's group is already completely dead and there is no bad agi in black's shape left. These were examples of important life and death problems which can happen in actual games. Now let's move to kos which are even more common because they can appear in the opening, in well-known joseki formations. We have seen this shape before. Do you remember how it appears? Black invaded white's formation, white captured black's stone, and now black plays this atari, provoking a ko. It feels uncomfortable for white to simply connect and get a bad shape, so white can consider starting a ko. What is your intuition? With which atari white should start it? They always teach you, play the double atari, because you will certainly capture something. But when it comes to a ko, you need to think one step ahead. This question is not really obvious, but it will take you to the next level of your ko playing skills. Remember that we need to consider 2 cases. What if white wins the ko, and what if black wins it? So how about the final shape in case white wins the ko? Let's say that white started with a double atari, and then if white wins, white captures this stone. On the other hand, if white started with this atari, then the next move would be also capturing this stone, so the final shape would be the same. But what if it will be black who wins the ko? In case of the double atari, black captures white's stones, and with the next move, black connects. White's shape got completely split. And if white started from the outside atari, black captured the stone and then connected, then yeah, also white's shape is split. However, now white's stone is on the third line. Maybe these results look similar, but where would you prefer to have a stone? Here? Or maybe rather here? Or maybe it doesn't matter? Well, no, it matters a lot. In this position, white's stone is completely useless. In fact, it fills in black's empty triangle. It fixes black's shape. On the other hand, if the stone is on the third line, then it is more on the outside, and later in the game it can be still used by white. This is not the only ko which could appear in the opening just out of nowhere, and you would need to choose with which Atari to start the ko. For such cases, remember this simple rule. Start the ko with the outside Atari, not with the crosscut Atari, the outside Atari. Put a stone in a place which won't be bad even in case you lose the ko. This is another common ko which often happens in the opening. Do you remember how this position appears? White attacked black's corner enclosure, and now white plays this annoying Atari. Black could start a ko either with the outside Atari or a crosscut. But in case black loses the ko, then the cutting stone will become completely useless, and it would be much better to have it on the third line. So, just like before, play the outside Atari. In this formation, there is one more thing to consider. The ko is not as huge as the one in the previous example. Perhaps white can agree on not winning it. Let's say that we had that joseki in another corner. White played this annoying Atari, and now let's say that black mistakenly started the ko with the cut. White took, and black played this threat. Yeah, this is a bad exchange, but still the ko threat is not that terrible. White would answer, black takes the ko, and where should be white's next move? Yeah, obviously, white could search for a ko threat, but in case white doesn't have any big ko threat, white could extend. And then black could finish the ko, but with the next move, white could capture black's stone and get some strength on the outside. Well, surely this shape is not as good as capturing black's stone in a ladder, but on the other hand, black played a negative exchange in that corner, so perhaps this result could be accepted by white. It was reckless of black to give white this opportunity to step back from playing the ko. Let's look again at black's correct move. If black played the outside Atari, white captured, black played the ko threat, and took back the ko, white doesn't have such a comfortable move left. White could connect, but then the game became already easier for black. Black could just connect, and white needs to manage somehow his cut groups, or black could play this move, and then the ko continues. However, now the ko became much easier for black. Let's assume that white won the ko and connected the stone. Just look at this shape. Alright, it's similar to if these moves were not played, but this exchange is so good for black and white's stone is not doing anything. This is exactly what I told you, that sometimes in a ko you can force your opponent into a very stupid shape. So the most important thing you should consider is your final shape after the ko finishes. Even if you lose the ko, you want to have some stones which can be used later. It would also be very nice if in the end your opponent is forced into an ugly shape. Let's take a look at the last example. After the Sansan invasion, a common continuation is to play Hane and then cut inside. After white plays Atari, black counters white's move here. White can cut, and now the most common joseki is to connect, but it is also possible to capture white's stone. White watched the first lesson of this course, so white is not afraid of starting the ko, and then black needs to make a choice. If black simply connects, then white would make life, and black's shape is not great. It would be better to just connect from the very beginning. So black is not afraid to start the ko, but with which move should black start? Just remember, don't play the crosscut. The crosscut is a big mistake. White would capture your stone, and then, even if your co-threat is big, White could ignore it because White got a very strong shape in this corner. Instead, Black should choose one of the outside Ataris, either this one or that one. White captures, Black plays a threat, and now it's pretty difficult for White to ignore it, because White's shape won't be as good in this corner. But if White answers, and Black captures back, what can White do? White risks really a lot in this ko. If White lets Black get this double Ponuki, then not only Black's shape is so strong, but also with the next move, Black could kill White's corner. In most cases, White would connect here. But then, this is a very good news for Black. Now the ko became much lighter. Black can now choose whatever they want. Black could push again, or maybe raise the stakes, threatening to kill White's corner, and then White certainly needs to fight the ko. Or the third option for Black would be to just play somewhere else, and even if White wins this ko right now, Black wouldn't care about it too much, because White's shape would be so bad, just like winning the ko before, but with this stone added. Oh, it looks so terrible. It's a completely useless stone. I really wouldn't like to be White in this situation. The biggest takeaway is that if you have two options how to start the ko, then you should think about the final shape in case you win the ko and in case you lose the ko before you make the choice with which move to start it.
By the way, you can also watch these lessons on our platform, gomagic.org. Except there, you'll watch them with interactive quizzes right within the lessons and practical exercises right after them. And if you enjoy watching these Go videos and you don't want to miss others like this one, go smash that like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and this is Go Magic.